You can be it, but you cannot know it fully. Because it doesn't even know itself fully yet. That's why creation appears. God is still exploring who it is and what it's capable of. And all the infinite multitudinous ways in which it can express itself and know itself and hallucinate about itself and dream about itself. That's what life is. An infinite dream of the Creator expressing and knowing itself, of God expressing and knowing itself. So even God doesn't know who it is quite yet, what it is capable of. God is still a mystery to itself, and it will always be that way because it is infinite. It has no beginning and no ending. Because it is infinite, even God cannot ever complete its self-knowing. That's why creation after creation reemerges. Even after the dissolution of the entire universe, there shall be a rebirth, a reincarnation of the entire grand illusion of this multiverse. Because the Creator is ever curious, and infinity ever wants to know itself and express itself. And here you are, an extension of that, a manifestation of that, the outcome of the Creator's curiosity. And here you are thinking with your physical human conditioned mind that you know what's best for you and what isn't, that you know who you are and who you aren't, that you know what's right and what's wrong, that you know what God is. Sorry. With our minds, we think we know what God is. Coming from God into this self-judgmental little world of the veiled human state. And then we think we have a concept of what it is. We got to surrender to the mystery at some point, my friends. It cannot be known. If not even God knows the full extent of its infinite nature, then how can we assume that we do with our conditioned 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old little physical brain? At some point, you've got to admit defeat to God. And this is when you come back home. And this is when you realize yourself as one with God, as one with that mystery. This is liberation. And this is when love will be automatic. This is when you will know that at the deepest part of yourself, you are invincible. You are invincibly free. And therefore, love is automatic. When you're free, love is automatic. If you're contained, if you are in a self-made prison of ideas and illusion and arrogance and pride, you cannot love. You can pretend to be nice. That's the best you can do. But you cannot love. Only God loves. No human has ever loved. Humans have opened themselves up to God's love to a lesser or greater extent, but no human has ever loved and never will. Only God loves. The human can only prefer, which is not a problem. I'm not judging it. It's just the mechanics of it. A human cannot love. You cannot do love. Because if it appears suddenly, if it's here today and it wasn't here yesterday, how could it be love? So if you're creating love today, it's a good attempt. But just understand the mechanics of it, nothing wrong with it, but the mechanics of it is what you're doing is you're opening your aperture to the love that was already there, but it was obscured from you by your own arrogance, by your own mindless thinking. And in the pause of mind, there is the I am that remains, that is indestructible. When you stop thinking, you still exist. In fact, you know the fact that you exist that much clearer. This is the beginning of getting to know God directly through the power of mind, through the power of consciousness. And to then surrender to that, to relax into that, allows the aperture to open to this automatic love. But only God loves. We can either align to that, be open to that, be receptive of that, let it come through us, or we can be closed off to it by thinking that we know. And this is the real power behind the statement, thy will is my will. Because when we have this little programmed will that thinks it needs this or wants this or knows this, then my will is separate from thy will. And it creates this barrier. It closes the aperture. And then we suffer. So as much as we like to know that we're righteous and that we know and hold on to that little flame of light, it's really detrimental to ourselves to be arrogant and prideful and to think that we know. The mystery is much more beneficial to us as a being. It feels much better to surrender to the mystery and to recognize the fact that we exist and to merge with that. I hope this didn't go over too many heads. If it does, again, allow just the transmission to flow forth. Allow it to relax something in you, perhaps, some ancient conditioning. And just let it work its magic. You don't have to fully understand everything I said. And feel free to, of course, review this, rewatch this, and Treat it like a guided meditation almost, which it kind of was. Now, for some more practical tools, some more me as a human being, what can I do to enhance my access to this liberating love? And one thing is forgiveness of self, but also forgiveness of other. So I'm sure that most of you have some kind of a story, some kind of a memory, something that you don't feel completely harmonious with, someone that did something or didn't do something that you feel when you think about it, it's like, there's just a little contraction, there's a little pain, there's a little betrayal, there's a little abandonment, there's a little conflict of some kind, right? Any opportunity like that is an opportunity. Any experience like that is a great opportunity to practice surrendering to God. Practice opening your aperture to God's love. Because if you as a person, again, the bubble that thinks it knows something, one way to pop that bubble is to give of yourself to something else, to forgive, to forgive, to release. So if you have the courage to just for a moment, and I'm not a big fan of bypassing your emotions, and you have the right to feel how you feel. You have the right to feel betrayed, and you have the right to communicate that and all that. So that's all valid. It really is, and it can be very powerful. But for this particular exercise, what if you could just forgive all of that? Forgive the debt that other people owe you in all ways, physically, financially, relationally, emotionally, romantically, whatever it is. Can you forgive the whole thing? Like genuinely, not to cover it up. Can you genuinely reach such a profoundly courageous, brave level of yourself, of your own willingness to know that you do not know, that although you might be right from many points of views, it still does not come close to the infinite mystery, which is the truth of God. So you might be right, but you're pinching yourself off from truth in the process of being right. So yes, it's valid. You're right. This person did that to you, or they didn't do that to you when they said they would. And you have all the rights to communicate that, and that can even be a beautiful reflection for them that they need to hear. So don't shy away from your human relational honor and integrity and communication skills. But behind that, for your own sake, let God's love shine through and let it reveal that nothing really major is going on here in terms of your relationships and your ideas and your conflicts. Let yourself transcend to a deeper domain of forgiveness where you don't hold on to what they did or didn't do. You might still communicate it because you see it's off, and it's good to correct behavior. It's good to reflect that in a loving way. Sometimes for yourself or your own ease, and sometimes purely out of service to others. You can take on that role of, hey, even though you feel already completely forgiven and loved, you can still take on the role of saying, hey, this isn't cool. I don't think this is the highest integrity. I don't think this is serving that being by behaving in this way and not getting it reflected. So I'm going to reflect this to them as a person so that they can learn and they can get more into alignment with themselves if they so choose to use that feedback. However, again, on a deeper level, can you forgive yourself for holding the grudge, perhaps? And can you forgive others in your life? Completely, off the hook. Let them off the hook. Let them off the hook. You know how much it weighs to carry all these people behind you on hooks? Chains and hooks. If you let them off the hook, it's so good for you. It's so good for your energy body, for your alignment, for your nervous system, for your overall aperture opening back to God, remembering the true love that you desire to be. Do you desire to be a grudgeful person? Do you desire to be in conflict with relationships? Do you desire to hold a grudge? I don't think you do. It's not what your heart craves. It's not what the God in you yearns for. The God in you yearns for the magic of unconditional automatic love and the freedom and the power and the invincibility that gives you. So find within yourself, attain to the courage. It's about courage, my friends. In this relational world, it's all about courage. Courage is what will grant you access to all those deeper domains of the Creator that are already wide openly available to you in every nanosecond right here, listening to my voice. Completely wide open, available like the sky. right here, ever present, like space itself. God's love is like space itself, ever present, ever available, never closes down, never judges anything. Everything that's ever happened passes through the screen of God uninterrupted. God's light radiates throughout all matter effortlessly. It's like neutrinos. They just pass straight through matter. They hardly ever interact with matter. They just pass through everything. Some of the most abundant particles in the universe. And they have zero or hardly any mass to them. They pass through everything. They don't interact with matter for the most part. It's like that. God's love is like that. Like pure space. All permeating, all pervasive. Did you know that every second 100 trillion neutrinos pass through your body? 100 trillion pass through your body every second. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. There you go. 300 trillion neutrinos just pass through your body uninterrupted. It didn't touch any of your molecular structures. That's God for you. And the way to access that is to surrender to this pure naked awareness that already exists before you take on any interpretation of this moment. When you stop describing this moment, there's a naked moment of just being aware. In that moment, God can be awoken to, the nature of God, its love, its formlessness, its ever-presence, its eternity, its timelessness, its beyondness, its intimacy, its ever-presence can be awoken to. But you got to surrender to it if you want it to become juicy. If you just keep it as a mental recognition, oh yeah, awareness, oh yeah, I'm aware, that's still very good. It's still very good. But you also want to include the feeling into it. You want to include the devotion into the surrender, the feminine, if you will. That's really when it becomes a whole, mystical, mysterious completion. That's when you be in love with God, and God is in love with you. And that's where the invincibility and the liberation and the power and the energy comes from, source. Then you're not of this world. And you'll know it because less and less people will be into you. But that's okay. There is a growing number of people that is moving in that direction. So the world is changing now. Hence this retreat as well at this timing. So let's bring God back into our lives. Let's separate it from, let's re-honor the fact that we exist and that we did not do that with our minds. We did not do that with our bodies. Our pure existence, consciousness itself, I am. It's a magical mystery that can only be appreciated for a second and abiding in what remains and surrendering to that, having faith in that, forgiving people. Forgive. You will see that when you forgive anybody, even for something they didn't do, like just practice on an unsuspecting stranger in the street, like, I forgive you. Maybe don't go up to them. Well, though you could. I've done things like that sometimes if it felt truly inspired, just because I felt like maybe they needed that or whatever. And it can be beautiful. Like imagine a stranger comes up to you and said, hey, I just want to let you know I completely forgive you for anything that's ever happened that you've ever done. I completely forgive you and I love you. Thank you. Now, you might think, whoa, that's crazy. But something would change, wouldn't it? Something would be touched within you. You would remember that moment when you're, go back home in the evening to your family to debrief about your day. This would have stuck with you. God's love is contagious, and it spreads fast once that aperture opens times 10, which is the intent of this retreat, that the aperture to God's love is open times 10 for all of you, and that will be a ripple effect. We've already had, I think, over 10,000 people view the session from yesterday, for instance. And that's a lot of energy. That's a lot of people opening to this message and re-honoring, re-embracing not the concept of God, but the living presence, to make God accessible and to become an embodiment of God, to not shy away from that, to not keep this so separate. Like God is out there, God is this big force, and I'm just this little gremlin thinking in the backseat of my car, whispering into my own ear, thinking I am this limited creature, which I'm not. If we re-embrace our faith, our surrender, our devotion, and we combine that with scientific approaches to not measuring with devices, that's not necessarily scientific, that's one extension of science. But science is an approach, it's an attitude. It's doing something in a way that works. It's dissecting and explaining something in a way that works, that has testifiable results over and over and over again. We can practice the presence of God. We can practice surrender. We can practice forgiveness. We can explain it to children how this works, although adults need it more. We can explain it to people. You could go up to a stranger in the street, and if they were open to it, you could explain how to access God to them. It's both scientific and religious or spiritual. It's both in the domain of surrender as well as in the domain of control. You can control your path into God, but surrender is required as well. But you can know how this works. It is methodical in many ways. And yes, it all ends in mystery. And that's that beautiful marriage, isn't it? So let's re-embrace the Creator. Let's re-embrace the divine life. Let's make it here and now. Let's make it a lived thing, not a scriptural thing. Let's make your life God living. Because it is. Just aware of it. Just become aware of it now. Let's recognize it.